Okay. Right. There's a sort of dark arty view to this, but actually it's just a question of going through the steps and making sure that you follow the right rules. Do you want this?
The food, is it?
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Just stick it on the food or the sheet. So what I've tried to do is describe how I do it, and everybody will do it differently. So take it with a pinch of salt, or take some bits and then overlay your own stuff in it. And if you already know how to do it, then there might be something here you don't know, or heckle me and tell me other stuff that I haven't yet covered. So I'm just going to step through a few starting points. So if you're going to go and get up from launch, it starts really from the night before. So you're looking at the forecast. It might be even 2 or 3 days before. You're looking at the forecast and understanding what's going on. Because very often you'll get a forecast that varies throughout the day. So start of the day, there might be clear blue skies, a lot of sunshine, and then come 2 o'clock, high cloud comes in, kills the sunshine, kills the thermals. So in your head you're thinking it's an early day. But if you just turn up, forecast is that it's flyable, or the instructor said fine, then you don't really know what part of the day you should be thinking about flying. And this develops. So a few days before, the night before, the morning of the flight, all of this activity is really forming in your head a view of when you think the best part of the day is going to be. It also depends on what you want to do. So if you want to fly locally and you want to do a 2-hour flight locally, then ideally you want to be in the air when it's working, and probably as soon as it's working and you can stay up. If you wait until later in the day, then you're going to get caught out. And the other thing that I see quite a bit of, I've seen in other clubs where I've gone and visited, is people will have a go, or maybe they'll have 2 goes and then they'll give up. And that's probably 2 goes when it's starting to work, and then the point when it is working, they've gone, right, I'm not doing this anymore. And actually, the more you fly, the better you get. And the more you try to get up, the better you get at getting up. So I would counsel everybody to never give up, just keep going. If you get tired, then that's fine. You can give up at that point. But it's amazing how the forecast doesn't necessarily factor with what's actually going on. So understand what's going on in the forecast, work out what you want to do. Is there a strong part of the day? Make sure that you're having a go during that strongest part of the day. Don't give up before it gets good. And work out what's going on. So are the patches of high cloud coming in? Well, it probably won't be as good when that high cloud comes over, but then it gets sunny again and there'll be more strength to the thermals. So it might be, and there might be more thermals, so it'll be easier. A little tip that I've sort of worked through in my head. When cloud base is lower, the thermals are shorter spacing between them. And during the day, as cloud base goes up, you end up with bigger spacing between the thermals. Now, if you've only come off the top of a winch launch, you want the thermals to be quite closely spaced so that you can find one in that short height that you've got before you join circuit. If you wait until it's really good, there's probably bigger gaps between the thermals, so it's going to be harder to find that first climb. And you quite often see people will launch 11 o'clock and there'll be a bunch of people get up, and then all of a sudden it's harder to stay up. And that's because cloud base has gone up, the thermal spacing has increased, and actually the distance between each thermal kicking off is further apart and harder to find. So again, if you think it might be working, get up there and have a go. Mike often will take off early and he'll disappear. And he goes, how does he do that? And I don't see anybody else taking off early. And that's a kind of golden rule. What are the pundits doing? Do the same thing. And if it doesn't work first time or second time, then just keep going, because you will find something. If you use all of these other tips as well. So, watch the sky and the wind. When you're driving up the club, what's going on? Quite often around, you'll see a blue hole over Bradwell Edge. It's a feature of the area. The hang glider pilots and paraglider pilots are very familiar with it because their range is much less than ours. and they can get quite frustrated because they can't get up, and they wait and try and wait and try. So that's interesting. So maybe you don't want to be where the blue hole is if there are other clouds and thermals around. Have a look when you're talking at the hangar. Have a look when you're driving out on the tractor. Obviously, keep looking where you're driving, but be aware of what's going on. Walking the wings and talking to people, but you're looking and aware of what's going on. Even sitting up at the launch bus waiting for cables or getting ready to launch people, just be aware of what's happening. And the purpose of this really is to identify likely locations. So where do you think the lift's going to be today? What's happening? So where are other people climbing? That's the ultimate marker. But again, all of this should be happening before you're getting in your glider. So you've got an idea. Oh, I saw John Mack go and climb on the southwest corner. Or 2 or 3 people have gone off the winch going down to the south and turned right to the west, and they've got a little climb out in the valley. Okay, or people are going out towards Eamon, they're getting climbs halfway along the south edge. That all forms part of that picture in your head that says, right, where's it likely to be working? Sunny spots is another classic. You know, that you're sitting on the ground and it goes cold because the cloud shadows come over. You're less likely to get thermals from there. So again, you're looking at other areas that have been in sunshine for a long time because they're likely to have warmed up quite a lot. My view of these things is I think there are two. I tend to use the sky a lot. So I'll look at the sky, I'll work out from the sky where I think the lift is, but I'm also factoring in where it's likely to kick off on the ground. And I'll show you on the next set of slides what I've in my head put together as to where I think the likely places are on the ground in different wind directions. Because we're not on a flat surface here. If you're flying somewhere like Bidford or Lancashire, it's flat, pretty much flat. So you're looking for different surface colours, whereas here we've got a lot of hills, and the shape of the area will affect the thermals that are kicked off. So is there a slope into it? Because if the wind's blowing up the slope and there's a little bubble there, it's more likely to release. Is the sunshine on a face, so south-facing or southwest-facing is likely to catch a lot more sunshine in the heat of the day. And again, at the end of the day, you're looking for more westerly slopes, which will get warmer. So all of these things go into making a choice. And this is an interesting one, because I've been caught by this a few times. Equipment setup. So is your volume turned up on the vario? You get to the top of the climb and all of a sudden there's silence, and why is the silence? Is it because there's no lift, or because I've got the volume turned down? And in our club gliders, there's a switch. I've got it actually on our discus as well. There's a climb glide switch, and it makes a completely different sound if you've got it on the glide setting. And you get to the top of the thermal, it's making a weird noise, and you go, what on earth is this sound? So that's one of those little on-the-ground pre-flight checks. I've got the volume turned up, and I've got it on the climb switch, so that it makes the right sound. That's me chatting. Has anyone got any questions or any other input to this? I'll come back to it if not. Okay. So, we're here. Sorry, it's not a very good Google Earth snapshot, but never mind. We're here. Here's Bradwell, the barrel, Eam. So this is Eam Edge and Abney. Imagine a sunny day like this, and imagine different wind directions. The thermals are going to kick off in different places, depending on how the wind's blowing. Be kicked off by the ridge, so most of the ridges will kick things off. Or if you've got lower warm areas that are slightly south-facing, you'll end up collecting a lot of heat. So triggers up here, that warm air will then roll up the hillside because it's lighter, so it'll try to go up, and it'll be blown by the wind in southeasterly and might come out of here. So think about where, in your understanding of how the hills are shaped, you're likely to get thermals rolling off. The way I've thought about it before is imagine somebody throws a great big bucket of water over this area and turns it upside down. Where are you going to end up with the drips coming off? And that's the thought process that needs to go in. And then if you were to blow a fan on it, those drips will tend to come off a slightly different set of surfaces. So if you think of it that way, and we say, okay, where are the likely areas in a north wind? Well, actually, there's our gully where we do the right-hand circuit to land to the west. Just north of it, there's actually a long gully that runs north just behind the hang gliding paragliding takeoff, and it can kick off out of that valley, so you can get some thermals rumbling up here and kicking off. You can get stuff on the north side of Shatton Edge. Sometimes you get the same effect here coming out of the gully just on the north side of the barrel. So these are areas where there's a little bit of an into-wind slope, and if there's a thermal running along, it'll tend to trigger it and kick it off. And all I'm doing in these pictures is thinking about the slopes that we have. So we've got slopes all the way around. Think about on the day, whereabout is it likely to kick off? In a west or a northwest. So I've got a big orange blob here. This actually, the hang gliding paragliding takeoff, is actually a really good thermal source. The number of times you fly along here and you get a lift at the north end of the gully or in front of their takeoff is actually, it's very often, it's a very positive area to live. You've got to be careful you haven't got any hangers and paragliders around. But the whole of this edge will kick things off in that wind direction. It's all fairly logical. There's nothing in here that's rocket science. Again, in the southwesterly, it will kick off on the edge here as well. And sometimes, you get this air kicking off in the Abney Bowl, going up towards Shatton Edge, and it'll kick off up there. Southerly, very similar. Southeasterly, again, there's the gliding club, you've got the moor here, and it goes down into the gully, so you've got quite a nice southeasterly facing slope, and in the mornings, or in the middle of the day, you'll get a lot of sunshine on here, so you're going to get a lot of heat. And the same thing here, it kicks up, and where it drops away, warm air can't follow the ground down, so it's going to kick up and off. So you're likely to get buoyant or more positive air in these areas than not. And again, east or northeast, and we quite often get good air here, sometimes even develops into wave. And the same thing, this gully behind the hang gliding and paragliding takeoff, where there's actually a motorcycle track, you can also get good lift coming out of there as well. Other clues. All right, so I'm going to go on and show you various pictures of just sitting in the cockpit on the ground and seeing what you can see. But these are the sort of things that, when I was saying, have your eyes on the sky, look and see what's going. A dark, flat cloud base. And I'll explain a little bit more about these ones. But if a thermal's going up fast, when a cloud is forming, the water vapour is condensing. And if there's a solid base, it means it's condensing quickly at that point. If you have a ragged base, what quite often happens is that the air is not going quite so quickly, and you'll get slow formation of cloud, so it'll be a little bit more raggedy. But if you have a solid flat base, that tends to indicate there's good strong lift going into that cloud. Something I was talking with Mike the other week about identifying a cloud that's working. Now, a cloud that's working has got a lot of water vapour in it, so it's going to reflect a lot of light. It's going to be very white. But the other thing is that you'll end up with these solid cauliflower edges, and it's almost, it hasn't got that raggedy blown apart look. Quite often clouds, once they've been through the formation stage and they're established, they can start to decay, and you'll see that they look rough around the edges and a little bit greyer than the newly formed white cauliflower clouds. So I'll have a look at some of those in the pictures we show later. Sometimes, if the cloud base isn't very high, when you come off the top of the lift, you can actually see cloud forming and going up. It's almost like tendrils of cloud just doing this and going into the main cloud itself. And what's happening is it's forming and continuing to lift and become part of the big cloud. But you can see the formation and the cloud starting to rise up. So it's looking for that sort of thing going on. It's movement that you're after. And human eye is very good at picking up movement. But that's, especially when it comes to convergence, is actually a very good clue. So I've got a couple of videos of that going on. I'll show you that one as well. Climbing birds. So if a bird is circling, it's rare that you'll find a better call. So if there's a bird circling, join in. And you will generally be in a good place to keep going up. Lift bubbles often align with the wind. So this is quite an interesting one. You'll often see a line of clouds, and what tends to happen is that you'll actually end up with an almost constant stream of little bubbles of lift, and you get stronger cores, but it might weaken a little bit or die off, and then it goes strong again. So if you're thermaling away and you lose it, then turn upwind, and make sure that if you've got any clouds, you position yourself in the same place as you were when you left the one that you were working on. Sometimes this works, especially when low down. You might do 5 or 6 climbs and it feels like it's all fallen apart. And you go, well, what do I do now? And the first thing you should do is to go back upwind along the same line. So again, be aware what upwind is, and then know that when you start to fall apart on it, that's your first choice, is to try going upwind. Sometimes if you can spot where the source is, you might find that you end up with a weaker thermal and you can go one step further and get a stronger core. But at the moment we're worrying about that first climb, so I wouldn't concern yourselves too much with that. But think about that. You often get these lines of lift, so it's very useful as a way of, right, where do I go now? Well, I'm going to go upwind, and again, this is something I brought from my hang gliding days. If I've got a nice climb and I've climbed up reasonably high, my first instinct is to go back upwind, and very often that will take me into another thermal that's come from the same source that's slightly stronger. Okay. Only go for ragged grey clouds as a last resort. So it's almost like a hierarchy. If you're going for your first cloud and it's within range and it's got a solid dark base and nice cauliflower solid edges, go for that one. If you can't reach that one, then go for one with a solid base and the edges aren't quite so good. And if you can't reach that one, then go for one that has the most solid base that you can see, but if it's dark, then great. If you can't reach that one, then you're kind of looking at anything that indicates lift, so any kind of cloud will tend to give you a pointer. So work your way through that. And I guess the first step is try and do this thinking, where am I going to go, before you launch. Because if you get to the top of the launch and then go, right, where am I going to go, you actually have a very different view. You're closer to the clouds, and it's harder to see which ones look really good or not so good. So try and make a choice before you launch that says, well, I know where other people are climbing, I know where the sunshine is, I know what the wind direction is and the likely kicks off ridges, so I'm going to go that way when I come off launch. It gives you a starter. Thermaling technique. So there's many ways of doing this. So I thought I'd try and do a sequence of what I think about when I'm doing it. So quite often, if you're coming into a thermal, it feels like you're driving over cobblestones. You can get this bumpy feeling, and that's a really good indicator that there's a decent thermal nearby. What I tend to do then is I'll release my pressure on the stick, and I will actually let the glider tell me where it wants to go. And I'll do exactly the opposite of what the glider's telling me it wants to do. And I'll come on to that one in a minute. In fact, no, I won't. That's this one here. So if you let a glider go, and you let it fly on its own, it'll find the fastest way to the ground. I didn't realise I had this. This is perfect.
Sure.
So, if I'm flying along here, and I get lift under that wing, it's going to blow me away from the lift. If I'm flying along here and I get sink on this side, it's going to pull me into the sink. So the glider will always go into the sinking air. And I've seen quite a few videos on YouTube and other things of people flying where they've let the glider drift where it wants to go. And all you're doing there is you're letting the glider find a faster way to the ground. So if you have that, the glider wants to go over here, you need to not only level the wings, but actually go slightly the other way, because that is lift under this wing. If you straighten up, you're just going to fly through the edge of it. So you need to do the opposite of what the glider wants to do. So if it does 10 degrees that way, you need to do 10 or 20 degrees that way. And you might find this, it might just be more buoyant air. It might not actually be lift. But you're spending more time in the air by avoiding the natural route of the glider, which is the fastest way to the ground. Okay. This is something I said to Simon Stannard on day one. If you're going to climb, don't let go. Take it all the way to cloud base, just don't let go, because it's unbelievable how far you can go and what options you have when you're up high. But if you take a climb and you go, oh, this isn't very good, you could climb 300 feet and feel like you're in orbit, but actually you've only got another minute and a half before you're back at the height you were before. So unless you can see something that you know you can reach and you know is better than where you are, stay in that first climb, because that will give you a whole day's worth of soaring. Once you're up high, finding the next piece to lift is so much easier. So that would be my key piece of advice. If you find something, stick with it. Don't throw it away. Be aware that you need to circle more tightly low down. So low down a thermal is smaller, and as it climbs, it expands. So you can afford to do wider circles and not be so tightly banked. If you look at most gliders, the sink rate is actually not that different between 45 and 55 knots. So you're quite happy flying around at 50 knots. There isn't a great need. It means you'll do bigger circles, but if you're more tightly banked, that'll make up for it. But there's no need really to fly too slowly, because the key thing is you lose roll control. If you get a big kick on the inside wing in a thermal and you're flying slowly, you put the stick right over and it'll not really want to go in, or you'll end up stalling it or having to use the rudder, which puts you very close to a spin. So having a little bit more airspeed when you've got it banked up is actually a good combination. It gives you roll control and you can stay in the core. Visualize where the lift is and shift position. So this is a classic one. If you're doing a 360, know where you are. So I'm on the front edge and I'm circling, and I'm going around and I'm going towards Bradwell and I get sink, and I keep going round and I get lift as I go towards the barrel. So I've done a 360, and now I've got a picture in my head that the lift is closer to the barrel. So all I do is, when I come around next time, is I tighten up when I'm going to Bradwell, because I don't want to be over there, so I'll do tighter turn, and then as I face towards the barrel, I'll straighten up a little bit, maybe 2 seconds, and then tighten again. And you're creating these oval shapes that migrate you into the middle of the thermal. So in your head, create that image. Where's the lift in relation to where I am on the ground? And that'll give you a really good picture to work to. Okay. Let's look at some videos. Right, whilst I pull one of these up, does anybody want to comment or ask any questions?
I think for Camphill pilots, it's worth emphasising your point that if you've got that it's worth straightening up into wind and trying to find the next thermal. It's very, very true when you're picking thermal off an edge. It's almost as if it's not a bubble, but it's a stream. And as you circle, you sort of fly out the back of it. But if you circle and circle until it starts to turn to rats, push into wind, and 9 times out of 10, you'll find another one.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mick. So, only me. Yeah. And you did a good takeoff. Yeehaw. So this is the point of this is the clouds. So we've got decent cloud here. You can see this is a bit raggedy. This one's a bit more solid. That one's even better. See how it's dark and flat. There's something here which is working. So the idea is that there's other people taking off, but you're going, well, I wonder where they're going to go. And again, you can look further in the distance. The wind is this way, so you can see what's coming in. So there's a shower here. So that's going to mean that you need to get off before the shower, or maybe give it a few minutes after the shower's gone through for it to dry out and start producing thermals again. That looks nice. Solid base, white fluffy tops. you can see the different colours in the cloud. Some of it's because high cloud is shading it, but some of it is actually just because it's a better cloud. But it's getting used to that thought process of saying, well, actually, I'm going to start to look at the sky and try and interpret what I can see as I'm going through it. Let's try another one. Okay, so this is looking south, and you can see there's some big clouds here. I'll just stop it there for a second. So you can see this has gone cune in, so this is all big showers and everything else. But there's some nice clouds. You can see here there's some solid bases. You can see what I mean by cauliflower clouds there. The challenge with all of these is they're all out of range. So we're going to have a winch launch. Where do we go? Where's the aiming point in a southerly when you've got these lovely clouds that you can't quite reach? There isn't anything off to the right, off to the west. So where do you go? So this is where being able to look at the sky and interpret it. So you see this here. See these here. Now I'm going to run it again fast and have a look at those clouds. We'll start from here. And those actually are low-level clouds. Good take off. So they're moving ever so slightly, but they are actually not the high-level stuff. And on this day, actually, the Poochas was circling out here. And these little bits, so we come off the top of the launch and go under these little bits, and there was enough to climb underneath these clouds. But if you just took a quick look at it, you wouldn't spot that. That isn't obvious at all. So you just look at it and go, well, there's nothing here. There's great clouds over there. They're out of reach. I'm just going to have to shoot and hope. But there's no need to do that. I mean, yes, there was another glider circling, which helped. But actually, these little wispies here are quite good indicators that there is lift around. And that's why I'm saying you're not always going to have this fantastic cloud to go for. Quite often, those will be in reach once you've climbed initially. So look for all of these little local indicators and watch. You know, that'll appear and then disappear, and you go, right, well, and quite often the cloud can form and dissipate in the similar area all the time. So you're actually looking at it going, yeah, I've got a good chance of getting something if I can take off and go to that area. But this is all part of the thinking before you go. What am I going to do? I had a similar one, which was a winchy view. Here we go, this one. So, this is from the other end, but I'm going to run this quickly. Just watch now, watch the sky as I go through, and see if you can tell me what you think would be a good place to aim for. I've just lost it. So I would say, if you look here, there's a line here where actually it's just constantly forming and rolling on. Just have another look down there as I run it through. And yes, we've got some cloud coming in, but it's still forming in the same place. So it's, again, spotting those patterns of, you know, if you were to look out over the clubhouse, you'd go, well, there's a cloud there. And then you'd look back a couple of minutes later, there's still a cloud there. Look back a couple of minutes later, there's still a cloud there, and there's some downwind. So obviously it's drawing in thermals nearby and going on downwind. And as I say, it would be great if the world was full of blue skies and white fluffy clouds. And it's not, a lot of the time you're going to get lift from slightly more subtle indicators, and it's being able to start to recognise those over time. I mean, this one here actually is probably working quite nicely. That's quite dark, and you can see that it's kind of falling off the back. It's starting to collapse, but this actually is probably, and there's probably something upwind as well that's forming it. There you go. He's going for it. Sorry, it's rattling because I'm still pulling in for that cloud. There you go. Let's have a look at something else.
Well, I was checking down on which way.
Yeah, that one was, yeah. I've got a load of very boring winch video. Okay, this is another one where actually you look at it and go, what am I going to do here? But actually, there are strips of darker cloud. That's probably going to work with that. And there's other sections coming in that might work as well. So it's working out what's the most likely, of all of the options that's available to me, what's the most likely one that I'm going to be able to do? And then working my way through it. So again, I'll run this one a little bit more positively, and you can see when you do it like this and you actually look at the cloud moving through, you can see that there are definitely some bits of cloud that will be working, and it's spending a little bit of time before you actually launch to work out where the most likely place is for you to go and have a try. Okay, what else have we got? So again, I'm just going to run this more quickly. This is a westerly, and and actually this one here, you can see up here, there's a bit of wave in the sky here. So it's almost like that's not got the fluffy top to the clouds that a lot of them have. This has got much more of a carved shape to it, and cloud base is a bit lower. So on this day, it's a case of going, well, I need to look around and see what else is going on. Are there other things that are happening that I can go and use? And quite often, if it's waving like that, you need to start looking over Bradwell and over Hope and start moving out this way, so getting to the end of the ridge and going out a little bit. I've had quite a few flights where I've just soared to the end, and it's just buoyant. You can see here, it's just buoyant enough for you to catch little bits and start to climb. So it's recognising the different types of cloud that give you the pointers as to where you think it's going to work. And same again. And sometimes it's very hard to work out what's going on. Let's go back to here. But when it does work, so can you see where this is? So there's Lady Bower, there's the Howden Dam. So I'm pretty much directly over the airfield at flight level 65. And that's the same sort of thing. You get the day where everything seems to be, in fact, yeah, 5, so I'm at 6.3 at the moment. And I've got the instruments telling me to beware, getting close to airspace. And you can see the wave from the distance here. So that's why, keep your eyes open, because some days it might work. And it's worth, all of the trying and not succeeding is worth it for days like that. Okay, a slightly different view. So this is at Bidford. So have a look at the sky here. Yeah. Now we dream of days like this. And you can see there's little fluffy clouds, but when it's like that, in fact there's a really nice one just here. Watch this. Which one is it? Yeah, just have a look over here and see, and I'll just run it through. You see that one blow up? So that's the, you can start to see the shapes that you're looking for there. It's got, at that point there, it's got a really solid base. Looking at this one here, it's got a really solid base, and it's got a nice cauliflower top, and it's not been blown apart. And you can see this one here, it's probably got some lift underneath it, because it's the sort of day where the clouds dissipate very quickly, and that's why we got all the blue. So really anything white is going to indicate that that's going to be a much better cloud to climb underneath than this one, for instance. So if we get a day like that, then get in the air! Right. And this is a similar thing, but what we're doing here is, actually there's a line of cloud coming out over the airfield. The south is over here, and what's happening on this day is there's a lot of lift underneath the south edge. You can sort of see it's all gone bubbly underneath. This is all starting to fall apart here on this side, but actually the lift was all up this edge of this cloud. So again, it's starting to recognise patterns. Quite often the upwind or the sunny side of the cloud will be much more buoyant than the other side. So spotting those things from the ground is actually really important. And there's all of this going on around, but it just helps. And again, even if you're on this side, you're closer to these clouds, which look very positive. Whereas if you're on this side, there isn't really that same look of a really good-looking cloud like this, with a nice solid shape on it. Okay. If that makes sense. Hopefully it does. What else have we got? Oh, I talked about rising tendrils of air under convergence. So I'm going to point you, it's not that obvious, but I'm going to point you. This cloud here, so this was we're taking off to the south, and there ended up being a line of convergence. So we've been out in the quite blue here, this side, and actually the cloud is forming here. I'm not sure it comes out that well in the video, but I remember gliding towards this area going, I'm not going to bother with anything else because I can see this is going up, and I'm starting to get out of gliding range of the club if I go much further. But I can see that the rough field is down below, so that's fine. I can see this is going up, and I ended up catching a climb here and then going up the other side. So I did 3 or 4 turns, got up to cloud base, and then started climbing actually up the north side of the cloud, and ended up about 2,000 feet above cloud base in a line of convergence that was going up. So spotting little things like that, they tend to be indicators of something unusual happening. It doesn't happen on a normal day. I'll just run the sequence and see if we can see anything there. It's quite hard to see, but the cloud is forming and then disappearing up in. I don't know if you can see that. You can watch the Vario. Not much going on here. This is the lifting area, so I'm coming at it so I can turn right, because it might be quite small, so I can circle into it. Vario's gone 2 down, 1 down, 0.
Oh, black bottom bit straight ahead, is
That is a really nice cloud, exactly. But what I'm doing is, I don't want to go there because I'll be quite low. You see now, here we go, 2, 3, so into that and climbing. You're right, Liz, that's the next one to go for. But actually, because I got this climb and it kept going, I didn't have to. But that was a good spot. Let me just go back to that. The humdinger of a cloud. There we go. Oh. Yeah. So you're right, Liz. That's a great one. And you're back into Edale. Even though you can see the cloud shadow. That's often quite a good indicator. Sometimes it's very difficult to work out how far away a cloud is. So if you can work out what the shadow is, then that gives you a good reference, a distance reference. And this getting into airspace now, and very often the clouds are really good when you get to airspace. So yeah. Okay, let's pick another one. Let's try a 360 video. Might take a minute to load. So, it's been raining here, and this is all fairly heavy, but there's a line of cloud going this way. You can see it's going out towards Hathersage, so we've got Stanage here. Northerly takeoff from the south end. And what we decided to do was, rather than trying to do potluck and hope that something over here was going to work, this has been raining, so clearly it had a lot of power in it, and it still looks good. There's still nice solid dark bases. It's a bit raggedy here, and a bit raggedy there, but it's a constant line. So the thought process was, if we go up and just fly along this, going towards Hathersage, there'll be something under there that we can stop and turn in. And actually, if we look up there and that way, there's really nothing very exciting if we look out to the west. I wouldn't say, yes, I'm going to go that way when I've got the choice of actually going for those clouds over there. That's a much more positive looking option. So let's see. Let's see what happens.
It's raining.
So it's raining, but you can see, let's just pause it there. So if you look at the vario here, so the vario's there, and you can see that it's doing 1 to 2, and that's meters per second, because it's in the Arcus, which is meters per second. So that's doing sort of 3 to 4 up straight away, and all we're doing is running along underneath the cloud. So, and sometimes you don't have to thermal when you hit a piece of lift. If it looks like that lift is going to carry on for a bit, then you can carry on as well, and we did. And it was still doing, in fact, a little bit further back there, I think it was doing much more. It was doing 6 up. Can't show it so easily on this screen, but yeah. So, and you can see from a position point of view, where are we? Okay, so there's the gully, there's Grindleford, and Hathersage is just off shot. If it goes. So we've actually gone a fair way in an unusual direction to the way you'd normally go. But all we've done is said, well, where's the sky working? Let's go there. What else have we got that works? We had a West launch and first climb. This is a curious one as well. Again, it's a 360, and I'll stop it at a couple of points. But there are a couple of decent clouds here, so that's clearly got some lift in it. It's not a brilliant cloud, but all you're looking for is that first kick up. So again, there's something here, and then if I look to the right and we look along the ridge, so the ridge line is just along here. We've got a cloud there, another cloud there. So that looks to me like in a westerly wind, because we're launching in the west wind, so there must be a breeze. It's kicking up off the ridge and up into these thermals, up into these clouds. So that's what we're going to go for. So let's have a quick run and we'll see what happens. You can see these clouds here. There's something there, there's a bit there.
What time do you use that, Mike?
I'll tell you in a minute, Liz. I'll put it down somewhere. So the choice then was... Say again, Pete.
Silage time, there were a lot of yellow fields locally.
Silage time.
Grass of pinker.
There you go. Technical terms.
So, late April.
There you go. So now we're flying along the ridge, so we're looking back down towards Hathersage that way. Vario's just out of sight down here, can't quite see it. It's a shame. See if I can zoom out a bit. Bear with me a second. There we go. Not much happening. And the altimeter's here, so about 550 feet. Here we go. And actually, these clouds here are the ones that are working, and I'm direct. So 2 to 4 up there, directly over the hanging takeoff. At the north end of the gully. And you can see these are the clouds that we're going for. There's a little bit coming in here as well. So, so it just gives you a picture of of picking the right direction to go and how to use it. Something slightly different here, out of curiosity. So this is up near Wetherby, and again here, when you're high, you can pick and choose where to go. So there's some nice solid clouds here, and actually we're climbing quite nicely just on the edge of this. I think this is when we went to Paper Bridge, so we ended up going up this way. This is taking us into Leeds Bradford airspace. Unfortunately, again, all the best lift is in airspace. So it's a case of picking the route in. But this looked really good, so if we could find a way to use these clouds, again, that's really nice. That's that's directly over Leeds Bradford Airport itself. This is better, but it's a bit further away. So I think the idea here is to take a little dogleg, climb here, and then take a dogleg out to these clouds, rather than going straight, because it's a big gap, and we'll have trouble getting there. So again, that's just, rather than showing you where I was stories, that just gives you an indicator. And I'm not sure if we've got anything. It's all the same sort of stuff. Show me that. Show me that. Let's launch. Try another one on the ground. And I think this one really is a case of just to give you an indicator. So this is quite useful because I think it shows you that you get these lines of cloud. So I'll just go back and hold it again. And what I want you to look at is this here. So we're launching again to the southwest. It's clear a west-southwest or southwesterly wind. But if you look here, all of these little bits and pieces are forming and dissipating, but all in the same area. So that again is an indicator on the ground. If you're ready, if you're aware that this is going on, then you've got a fairly good idea of where to go. I'll just run the sequence on this one so you can see that running and take your own view on it. So that's quite positive in terms of working out, well, where am I going to go? You know, it's at the end of the launch run, and actually there's a good set of clouds just constantly forming and dissipating. Okay, I'm going to hold it there and ask if anyone's got any questions, because I could keep doing this all day. But it's that whole prep. Think about what you're going to do, think about where the likely lift is going to be aware of what's going on, and then launch, and you're much more likely to find something. And then when you're up there, use the indicators. Don't let the glider take you anywhere, because it'll take you to the ground the fastest way. And have a mental picture of where the lift is when you've started circling. And if you lose it, then go back upwind. That's it. It's easy. I wish.
One observation, Mike, that you haven't mentioned is when people go to a cloud, they'll pick a cloud and head off that way, and you watch them, and they go nearly there, and then they turn around.
Yes.
You think,
Yes.
why don't you get properly underneath it?
Yes.
But it's very difficult to judge that.
Yes, it is. That's a good one. And I think the thing to think about again is, and we do this I think here more often, we tend to go from the hill to a cloud, and it tends to be upwind. So if we're going to the south, and the wind's blowing from the south, you get to the cloud, but the thermal is drifting into the cloud with the wind. So if you have to go almost beyond the cloud to get to the lift. So if you think about it in a westerly, here's a really nice cloud. The wind is blowing into that cloud, and if you then fly to here and you go under the cloud and you find nothing, it's because you haven't gone that extra little bit to catch. Because if it's forming on the upwind edge or on the sunny edge, the thermal's going into that edge of the cloud, and then the cloud is forming and dissipating. So you need to be almost beyond the cloud before you get to the lift if you're coming from the west and going underneath it. Yeah, that's a very good one. Thank you.
I think one of the ones where you showed the cloud forming, if you looked at the timeline on that, a minute and a half it went from a tiny wisp to a full-blown cloud that you would say, look at that, classic.
Yeah, yeah.
A minute and a half
Yes,
to form,
it's not long.
and that's the time scale sometimes. It's quick to dissipate.
Yes, exactly. Cool.
Might you ever find that you're in a cloud where there should be a thermal and in actual fact you're between bubbles? And because you're in between bubbles, nothing's happening. As you start to descend, you go back into the lift again.
Yes, so it's not an exact science, I would say, and you'll find that you go somewhere and you go, this is going to work, and it doesn't.
Yeah.
And you quite often will be, you know, I can outclimb anybody in your head, and then all of a sudden everybody's catching you up. And that's because the bubble that you're in has got different strengths of thermal in it, and quite often what happens is everybody concertinas towards the top of the thermal. So you'll quite often be climbing with people, and you know, if you're on the top, everybody catches you, and if you're underneath, you're catching everybody. Yeah, you also, as you said, Tony, you'll get gaps, you'll get a bubble. But to me, the bubble, unless it's a very light wind day, you'll tend to get the bubble again by going back upwind, rather than in the same place. You know, it's almost like, well, it's dissipated where I am, I'll need to go somewhere, and that first call is, well, I'll try upwind and see what happens. Yeah. Another one. Here's a variation on a theme. So I was in the Arcus with Chris Dawes, and we were trying to get into wave, and we got a couple of little bits. This is a day when peak got really high over here, and you ended up getting a wave actually on the main ridge, didn't you, Pete?
One of the local hills, I can't remember which one.
I think we've been sort of around with Pete going, he's here somewhere, maybe he's got the wave, let's find out what he's up to. And what we were trying to do here, and this is something I've done at Talgarth, is, you see the line of cloud on the ground, that's probably a very nice cloud street. So our thinking was, if we could go along a cloud base and go faster and faster and faster, get to the end of the cloud and climb up the front, and then see if we can get into the wave. And I'd done that at Talgarth, and it would work really well. So we were speculating on what we can do. So this is an attempt to whiz along this cloud, come up the front edge, and hopefully pop into some wave. And you can see various here. Pete was out here somewhere. Bit of sink as we came into it, and then got to 0. So you can see the speed went from 100, so we're speeding up to 110 knots. Sorry, not 110 knots, 110 kilometres an hour, which isn't very fast. But the speed you can see is increasing because we're trying to stay underneath the cloud. And we ended up doing 160 kilometres an hour underneath this cloud, thinking at some point we'll get to the end and then we can just pull up and we'll be in the wave. So you can see it's, even though we're doing 85 knots, 90 knots, we're still doing 2 to 4 up, because this is in metres per second. Get to the end of the cloud. It didn't work. So we went to Pateley Bridge instead. So